Welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show. I'm your host, Dave Homewood. Today, I'd like to welcome Michael Williams, Squadron Leader Michael Williams, to the show. Hi, Mike.
How you doing?
Good. Now, you're the commanding officer of the new Air Force Heritage Flight.
The flight commander, yeah.
Flight commander, yes. Let's start off. Well, we're going to talk about the flight, but let's start off just talking about you for a start. What's your background and how did you get into the Air Force and aviation?
I was one of those typical aviation nuts kids that just can't remember wanting to do anything else. And growing up, everything was about airplanes. Left school, did the typical thing and pumped gas for a couple of years to get money to go flying.
Yeah.
And I went through Massey University, did the degree program there and was an instructor for a bit, and then joined the Air Force.
So you were you didn't go straight from school. You were a few years older when you joined.
Yeah, so I was nearly 25 when I joined the Air Force.
Okay, wow, gosh, that would be like an old man in the system, wouldn't it?
It wasn't too bad at the time. I was definitely the oldest on the course, but I think the ages of people coming through, if anything, have probably increased slightly. We've had people a lot older than 25 coming in.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, that's good. So where did you grow up? Where are you originally from?
I'm from Northland, from a small sheep farm north of Dargaville in a place called Ohakea, which is probably not on most people's maps.
No, so you probably didn't have a lot of aviation going on around there.
Not a lot, no. No, there was Dargaville Air Club. Went down and had my first flight there as a kid.
Yeah.
And with the local Explorers Club, but as far as Warbird aviation in particular, that was several hours away in Auckland.
Okay. So you mentioned Warbirds there. That's something that you've gotten into over the years, is the vintage stuff, the Warbird stuff. I know that you've done a rating on the P40.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can't thank Liz Needham and Frank Parker enough for that. That was through a Warbirds over Wanaka scholarship, and that scholarship plus the generosity of Frank and Liz really got me through that.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, you also flew with the vintage Aviator for a while on the World War I machines as well.
Yeah, in fact, we flew together. You were in the RE8 and I was in the SE5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're my wingman. That was pretty damn cool.
That was really special. It's amazing machines.
Yeah, absolutely.
The BE2 and the SE5, which was amazing. Yeah. RE8 and whatnot. That's New Zealand's very lucky to have that.
Yes, absolutely. So in the Air Force, you ended up on Orions, flying Orions. Am I right?
Yeah, probably. The game away behind me there, but yeah, I was flying the Orion. I was a captain on that. Finished flying that in 2008, end of 2008.
Yep.
Came back to Ohakea and did the flying instructors course, and then took a year's leave without pay. Went over to Australia. Helped manage a Tiger Moth Joy Flight company. We had a couple of Tiger Moths and a Yak 52 over in Point Cook.
Oh, right.
Came back, instructed on the King Air, and then I was lucky enough to head over to Australia on an exchange to instruct on the PC9. And,
okay.
Came back in 2015 and been on the Texan ever since.
Okay, so the PC9 would have been a really good lead into the Texan instructing.
Yeah, the PC9 was great. I mean, it's an old airplane now. It's why the Australians have swapped them out for the 21. But the PC9, it's great. If you had compared the PC9 with the Texan, if it was a Friday afternoon and you wanted to go for a fang, you'd take the PC9 and hang it off the prop. But if you're going to go to work and work in an airplane every day, then the Texan, hands down, is far better. But it's the current generation, the Texan. It's got all the mod cons, whereas the PC9 was the ones that the RAF had. That was a a mid 1980s design.
Right. So there was no glass cockpit in them or anything like
that. Some of the displays were CRT, but the glass would be stretching it, I'd say.
Okay, yeah, right. And so, as an instructor at Ohakea with the Texan, you also had a sideline job with the Historic Flight as the flight commander of the Historic Flight. How did that happen?
Well, I've always, since I've joined the Air Force, been putting in my annual reviews that I want to get involved in the Historic Flight because that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
And was lucky enough to get involved with that. Stuart Anderson was the flight commander at the time.
Yeah.
And I'd previously got a type rating in the Harvard in Rex Burton's machine. I'd saved up my money over a couple of years and went and did a rating in that machine. So I came to Historic Flight with a Harvard rating, but the ability to go and fly the Harvard consistently and not worry about all the dollars rolling out the exhaust meant that it wasn't until I flew it with the Historic Flight that I could really concentrate on betting in the skills with the thing.
Right.
And then about a year or so after that, I was lucky enough to be made the flight commander of the Historic Flight.
Cool. And of course, the Historic Flight had the Harvard NZ 1015, and it also has a Tiger Moth, which hasn't flown for a long time. So did you fly the Tiger in that, or was it already grounded before?
So yeah, I was flying the Tiger Moth as well. The last flew at the end of 2018.
Yep.
Before we stopped everything with the Historic Flight just to take stock of what we were doing and what we were going to do. But Tiger 6-2, it's just been it had a full IRAN, so completely rebagged the airplane, zero-time engine. We spent a lot of time and effort on that airplane, just as we had with Harvard 1.5 at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were flying the Tiger Moth. It's fully serviceable now. It's we even gave it a fresh C of A within the last year.
Okay.
It's sitting in the hangar at the moment, semi-inhibited, just as we sort out the paperwork to get that thing going again.
Okay.
But it's there already.
It's basically just waiting for a test flight and back into service.
Yes, some paperwork first, just organisationally, and then it's ready to go. And
So,
we've the Tiger Moth purists won't like it, but we've brought a tail wheel and brakes for it as well.
Okay.
Because with the P8 coming to Ohakea, the infrastructure at Ohakea is getting less and less conducive to a tail skid airplane. So we've had to buy the tail wheel kit and the brakes. So that's ready to go on as well as soon as we can get the airplane as a whole going.
Yeah. So the Harvard, you had an incident in the Harvard. Can you talk us through what happened there?
Yeah, it was had a bit of an incident. Monday, August 13, 17 minutes past 10 in the morning. Embedded in the mine.
Yeah.
The incident itself, it was quite interesting from a human factors perspective. It's well, I was in the front taking a wings course student for a fly. We'd just taken off and we were climbed out of Ohakea, leveled off just short of Lake Alice to the north of Ohakea there.
Yeah.
And there was an almighty bang from the front and some quite severe vibration. And then so I turned back towards Ohakea, and during that turn itself, there was an even bigger one, which at the time I described as like an explosion in the front. And
wow.
The bang was so big, the engine cowling jumped on its mounts as it got impacted by one of the cylinder heads as it was retiring from its job as being attached to the cylinder.
Wow.
And it just got worse from there. And it was the middle of winter. There was there'd been a lot of rain. I knew we were faced with probably forced landing the thing, but the engine was still giving power.
Yeah.
And all of the fields that we had were completely sodden. And the one field I did know that was what the condition was Ohakea, and of course that was just over there. You know, it was about 4 miles away.
Yeah.
So the engine was still giving power. So decided to see if we could make Ohakea, but on the proviso that we'd never be without a forced landing option. And so we did that. We basically went from one field that we could force land in to the next one as we made our way back towards Ohakea. But as we were doing that, more conrods failed along the way. So the engine just got worse and worse. And the canopy was completely covered with oil, so we couldn't see out. You can crack the canopy in the harbor a little bit. So I had a few inches just on the side as I cracked it open, because any more than that, then the oil was going to come in over me as well.
Yeah. So
really reduced visibility. The vibration was so bad that the instrument panel was shaking violently on its mounts, and you couldn't read anything. So the basic instruments like altitude, airspeed, everything was completely illegible. The noise was horrendous. The shaking caused the fire extinguisher to break its mounts. The ignition switch which in the harbour is a big lump of steel on a steel shaft, that snapped off.
Wow.
And actually impacted my helmet. There's a dent in the visor on my Alpha helmet immediately in front of my eye.
Wow.
So when it comes to helmets, I'm a fan.
Yes.
That was a hell of an impact. There was, as time went on, you know, we got smoke and we couldn't talk to each other, and it struck me that, which gets back to my point about the human factors side of it. As time went on, things got really worse, much worse, and there was the realization that in the next 2 minutes, we were either going to be absolutely fine, walking away, no problem,
yeah,
through to the absolute worst case. And I'd heard previously that when things are really bad, the human brain tries to talk you out of it. It tries to say, "Oh no, you're fine, it'll be right."
Yeah.
And the worse things get, the more pronounced this is. And during the incident, as all these things started to add up, and it was getting worse and worse, the effect was so pronounced that I actually noticed it in myself.
Wow.
And which then made me recognize really just how bad this was.
Yeah.
This human factors phenomenon. But eventually we almost made it back to Ohakea, got to the last point of committal for the last field before Ohakea, and I by then had nothing else to do but just stare at the threshold of runway 09, and I noticed that it was just slowly starting to move up in the windshield, which meant the aim point was going short.
Yeah.
So I couldn't hand on heart say I was going to make Ohakea. So at that stage, committed into the field on the boundary of Ohakea.
Yeah.
And shutting the engine down, the last conrod let go, which we think was the master rod was the last one to go, since it was still firing. So we then landed wheels up in the field just across the road from the base commander's house.
Wow.
And we land wheels up when you're not on the airfield, because that's the safest way to do it, because especially in winter, which we were, you put the wheels down, you land in a field, the wheels dig in, and next thing you know, you flipped onto your lid.
Yes.
And things were much worse. But so the fact that the last conrod let go as we made that decision to commit to the field means there's absolutely no chance in my mind that we would have made it back to Ohakea. And of course, there's that big bank that leads up to the threshold of 09. So.
Right.
But amazingly compelling. This is another one of the human factors things, to have the the threshold of the runway that you know, and it's just there. And your brain goes, yeah, you'll be fine. Look at the runway. It's just there.
Yeah,
you'll be right. And yet you need to disregard that and then commit into the field. And I remember Johnny Barger, the vintage aviator, he was telling me that you've just got to make a decision. So doesn't matter if it's the best solution in hindsight after the event, but you must make a decision, because if you don't make a decision, then that whole anchor cycle, aviate, navigate, communicate, administrate, that barely goes beyond aviate. Everything else hangs on making a decision.
right.
So it was certainly an interesting event. Kept me awake for a couple of nights. We're slid on the ground, and as we're sliding along, I'm thinking this is not as bad as what I thought it could have been. And it was just like coming down off the plane in the speedboat, really.
Right.
And the airplane's fine. We've done a survey on the. So let me just cut it out. We've done a survey on the airplane, but haven't done any work to it. It's the airframe's fine, and there's an engine and a propeller and 2 new instrument panels because they were shaking to bits.
Yeah.
But we haven't done any remedial work to the aircraft. It's carefully stored at the moment at Ohakea. We're going to get the heritage flight up and running first, and then readdress what we do with Harvard 15, because it's a very important aircraft to us. And there's certainly a lot of sense in flying our own Harvard if we can. But, we'll get the flight running, and then we'll have a look and see what we're going to do with Harvard 15.
I always find it remarkable thinking about how, you've force landed wheels up in the field, and yet the airframe is fine. I mean, you must have done the most remarkable force landing, particularly since you couldn't really see what you were doing.
Oh, there's a bit of luck in there as well, because we, of course, with the canopy open ever so slightly, I couldn't see out the front, so I was doing a curving approach to the corner of the field, because I could keep that within view out the side. So I couldn't fly a final, so just did a continuous turn to that point.
Yeah.
But right at the very end, I had to then roll out wings level and just go straight ahead. And I remember thinking, oh, we might have actually just pulled this off. I didn't know how fast we were going because the airspeed indicator wasn't legible. But as I flared, I thought, oh, that feels about right. Yeah. But there was no float, and that surprised me at the time. We rolled out, we flared, it felt normal, but then we're on the ground just sliding along. And it wasn't until after we got out that realised that we'd actually snagged the top couple of wires on a sheep fence, a really old fence with the tail wheel.
Oh, wow.
And so we'd basically done an arrested landing, like on an aircraft carrier, accidentally.
Wow.
And I had no idea the fence was there, because I just couldn't see it.
Yeah, yeah.
There was the fence, there was a pump shed, a bank, cow shed, a row of trees, and all of that. We just couldn't see it. But we knew that the flight path to the aim point was clear. We knew we weren't going to hit anything, because I could see that.
Yeah.
But everything else was completely blacked out. So it was purely by luck. We snagged a couple of wires on the fence, and the strainer posts were old and rotten, so they snapped off quite easily, and it was really just a gently arrested landing. So that helped a lot. And because it was so wet in the middle of winter, it surfed along like a boat, splashed mud all over the airplane, and that helped protect the airframe as well. It literally didn't scratch the paint underneath. The field was that soft.
That's amazing. That's amazing, because that paint. Sorry.
Which was good, because we'd only just repainted the thing.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, that paint was gorgeous too. It's such a nice job on it.
yeah, it was nice.
Yeah. So, how about the poor fella in the back, your student? How did he cope with that?
Yeah, so that would have been absolutely terrifying. At least I was busy in the front, but I tried talking to him on the way down, but the noise was just so loud he couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
And he said that never in the history of human flight has anyone been strapped to a seat so tight as what he was. And in the back, the shaking so violent, the large compass that's in his cockpit, it's got a verge ring and everything on the top.
Yeah.
That flew apart. The verge ring bounced everywhere. The
Wow.
fire extinguisher bounced down to the bottom in the back there. That was in the rudder cables. The fuselage was flexing so much that the canopy rail started to unscrew itself from the airframe. So it would have been absolutely terrifying. And the noise of the canopy vibrating in the back was horrendous.
Holy hell! I didn't realize it was that bad. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, and that played on my mind. I think the obvious thing is, did I do the right thing with trying to make Ohakea by keeping it running? Could I have shut it down just right at the start, and I wouldn't have had those problems. But the fact was, the engine was still giving power. We were still functioning to be able to fly the aircraft, and Ohakea was just there, and that was the known surface. Everywhere else was a bog. And we never left ourselves without a forced landing option. But I often thought to myself, did we do the right thing by just not immediately shutting it down and landing in the field? But
then again, then again, you might have hit something in a field
exactly
that you didn't see as well. So you both walked away, and the aircraft can be rebuilt and fly again. So you did the right thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the outcome would suggest that as well. But it was just a really demanding situation that we put ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, it's not your everyday flight, so you did well. And of course, afterwards, you were even given an award for the airmanship, weren't you?
Yeah. That was a nice touch, I guess. Yeah. Defence Meritorious Service Medal out of that one. So.
Yeah, much deserved.
Good way to close it off, I think.
Yeah. Now, because of the loss of the Harvard from the historic flight, you then had to start to rethink about where the history of the Air Force was going to go in terms of the flight. So
yeah. So we that was the catalyst that made us just stop and I think, what are we doing here? And do we need to be doing this? And if we are going to keep doing it, how should we do it? So an external review was commissioned and several months of work went in. And the result was that the NZF remained committed to heritage aviation, but that we need to get much more utility out of it. So basically just do it properly.
Yeah.
So the historic flight was great. It gave valuable service over a long time. But when you look at it, it was flying two very important training types. So the Tiger Moth and the Harvard. The 66 came through for a period as well, back in 87, I think it was. But you turn up to an air show and there's plenty of Harvards and there's plenty of Tiger Moths. All important aircraft, don't get me wrong. I love them both. But for the NZDF to be spending public money on that, is that really the best thing? So the Air Force decided we're going to stay in the game, but we're going to do it properly with aircraft that represent the operational history of the Air Force. So things like your Corsair, Kitty Hawk, Avenger, Spitfire, Mustang, that sort of thing. So that's in particular the Spitfire and Corsair and the Kitty Hawk and Avenger. They represent the operational heritage of the RNZAF.
Yeah.
So in those aircraft, RNZAF people were fighting. They were doing the job, and that job is still the same now as what it was back then. We may not be doing it all the time, but that's the role of the NZDF. But of course, within that, you'll know that aircraft like the Spitfire, the RNZAF never historically operated a Spitfire. So then there lies the shift from a historic flight into a heritage flight. So whilst historically the Air Force never operated the Spitfire, the New Zealand Squadron in the Royal Air Force is definitely a part of our military aviation heritage.
Yep.
So hence the shift to the heritage flight. So the review recommended, yes, do it as a heritage flight, do it properly with aircraft that represent the operational history of the Air Force, and do it in aircraft that also grab the public's attention, because we need to be outward focused. So use an aeroplane that when it flies past the air show or fly past or whatever, the public aren't going to stop and they're going to go, wow, look at that. That grabs their attention. And then you can break down the interaction in pretty much 4 different areas. You can look at it, first area, high level diplomacy, defense diplomacy internationally. So this is how you demonstrate to your allies and partners and friends the importance of that you place on the shared sacrifice. So for example, World War II, we were fighting in the Pacific, and we were fighting with our friends and allies, and that's still important to us. So internationally, we can show that importance by investing in the heritage flight.
Yeah.
The second area that you can look at is New Zealand's heritage. So the interaction with the New Zealand public that don't necessarily know anything about aviation, or in particular their military aviation heritage, but they're New Zealanders, so this is part of their heritage. And of course, arts and heritage is a big thing at the moment as well, so it's quite topical. But this is how you can engage with the New Zealand public who don't know about aircraft, especially, and say this is your heritage. Yep. And from that as well, they will potentially think, oh, aviation, that's pretty interesting. Maybe I'll look at a career in there, and that's where the Air Force can step in and say, oh, well, yeah, we've got a few jobs going. Yeah. Get people in the Air Force that way. The third group that we interact with is the New Zealand aviation scene, the aviation public, and they know about the Air Force, they know about the aircraft. So, and that's not going to change. So with this group, we can demonstrate the professionalism of how we go about our business in the RNZAF. And maybe that will solidify someone's thoughts about joining the RNZAF. So again, there's benefits to the RNZAF. Yeah. And the fourth and final area that we get benefit out of the flight is internally within the RNZAF and the NZDF. This is a way of underscoring our core values, which are still the same now as what they were. And if you can imagine the Avenger, for example, that's painted up as 1/8 plonky, and the original crew of serving RNZAF personnel was shot down and killed over a ball in World War II in the original plonky. Yep. So this represents the core value to currently serving RNZAF members. Previous RNZAF people were out doing the job, and they were killed doing it. Yeah, that represents a lot to us. So those are the 4 areas: internationally, New Zealand public, aviation community, and internally within ourselves as well.
The main aircraft, operational aircraft that are flying with the flight at the moment are the Spitfire and the Avenger, which both belong to Brendan Dare. And Brendan's aircraft have, for a long time now, cooperated with the Air Force. They've done flypasts for the Air Force, and they're flown by Air Force personnel who are still flying now with the heritage flight. So it's not exactly a new thing, but the possibly the newer thing is that you're now mixing those aircraft with the Texans, who are the modern day current aircraft, and that I think that adds a really neat element where you've got the old and the new together, the current and the history, the heritage, and
it links with the old with the new. So the past with the present and the future.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right with the future, because the Texan is the trainer. That's where all the future pilots come from. And of course the other thing about it is that you're taking it out around New Zealand, taking it on the road. And usually we only see these things at these days we've only really seen these things happening at air shows. But last Sunday on the 3rd of April, you had your first big outing where you guys flew the flight of 4 aircraft from Ohakea down to Christchurch.
We did, yeah.
And that was brilliant. I mean, I followed you guys most of the way. I think I just south of Ohakea. I followed you all the way down on Flight Radar, and I followed you all the way back up again on Flight Radar. I was in the wrong part of the country to actually see you guys, but what was brilliant was watching on Facebook all of the wonderful clips and photographs of you guys flying over towns all the way down and all the way back up again, and the excitement that's generated is fantastic. Yeah,
and that kind of illustrated the concept, really. There was the Air Force Heritage Flight has their own Facebook page, and encourage anyone to go and follow that.
Yeah, me too.
But I put one post on that page which had the route of what we were going to do to Christchurch and back, and within a day we had I think it was 800 shares and 700 likes, and a couple of days after that we were 1,300 shares, and just on one post we had 1,000 comments. And so the interest that it garnered is for our first event with a brand new page and just putting the feelers out there. This is what we're doing now, and the public really got on board, which was great to see. And it was obvious that many of those commenting were not aviation people, and so this is the New Zealanders learning about their military aviation heritage. That's perfect. And those that did know about flying, they were pretty excited as well. So it was good to see. It was reassuring to see the concept. We might have something here.
Yeah, exactly. And I run the New Zealand Air Show archive as part of my website, and over the years when I've been researching for what happened back in the past with Air Force teams and things like that, they used to take originally they were the CFS Harvard team, and then it became the Red Checkers, and them and also Vampires and a Bristol Freighter would go with them, and they would go around the centres and do all the different flypasts over towns as they went from city to city, where they'd refuel and they might do a bit of a display. To me, that I was thinking, well, that they used to show the flag, and the Air Force doesn't really do that anymore. You're lucky if you ever see the Air Force anywhere over your little rural town,
Yeah, well, we'd like to, but
yeah. Well, that's the thing is, you guys are bringing it back. I mean, it's. I think the last time that anything like this happened would be 1990. I think it was when the Kiwi Red Skyhawks went round all the districts and towns, and they flew around the country. And I can't think of anything else since then. That's maybe the Checkers have done it. I'm not sure, but on the way somewhere. But
Checkers and Falcons obviously trying to get out and about as much of the country as well. And over the last weekend, the Hercules and the Orions and the 109s, the 90s, they were out and about as well.
Yes,
and going as far as we could. And in fact, we actually coordinated with the other units who was going to go where, and the Heritage Flight going to Christchurch and back, that was represented about as far as we can go. So that was max range for us. And obviously we'd love to have gone further south, in particular down to Ashburton. That was a very important base for us during the Second World War. But we're literally planning it down to the last minute or so of extra fuel.
Right.
And
So which is the most limited on fuel? Would that be the Spitfire?
No, it's not actually. So it's the Texan.
Oh, really?
So the Spitfire has wing tanks.
Yeah, of course. Instead of guns.
So the Spitfire, Vickers made 2-seat versions of it after the war for the Irish Air Corps.
Yeah.
And because they reduced the fuel capacity in the fuselage tank, they designed a wing fuel tank. And so the Biggin Hill Trust Spitfire has that mod.
Right.
So the Spitfire is okay, and the Avenger, that thing can take. That's a flying petrol station, that thing. So
yeah.
They had plenty in it, but the formation's operating at 180 knots, which is comfortable for the Avenger mainly.
Yeah.
But for the Texan, that's quite slow for an efficiency standpoint. The Texan's most efficient at about 240 knots. So for that reason, the distance we can go is reduced with the Texan.
Okay.
So when we went down to Christchurch, that was a 2-hour flight. That's the longest flight I've ever done in a Texan at lower levels. I think I've done a 2.2 on a test flight, but that was up around 30,000 feet for a lot of it. So
okay.
Yes, it's the Texan. Surprisingly.
Right. So I mean, in the future, there's always the possibility that you'll go down, refuel, and go further south and visit these towns down further, and maybe get to Thailand.
Yeah, in particular for air shows down there, when the flight goes somewhere, we don't want to just transit. We want to do flypasts. So you can imagine the next time Warbirds over Wanaka rolls around, we're not just going to transit down there. We'll try and hit as many different spots as we could.
Yeah.
And the West Coast was another area on the weekend where we really looked hard at whether we could do it or not, and we just couldn't make it work. We looked at various different creative ideas to get there, including splitting the formation up, and some go high level, some go low level, and we'll meet up somewhere. But it's just got too hard, unfortunately. So we really appreciate the fact that the people who didn't get to see us were disappointed. And we see those comments and we're trying.
Yeah, I mean, this is only the beginning, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we know that the concept works. And so this weekend on Saturday, 9 April, we're going to Auckland and back. And that route on our Facebook page as well.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to that because you're coming to Cambridge, hopefully, as long as the weather holds out. So
the turn point, Dave Place.
Yeah. that flight to Christchurch, one thing I was wondering is, were you guys in formation the entire way?
Yeah, we weren't necessarily in tight formation.
Yeah.
Sometimes, in particular down the east coast of the South Island, we would relax a little bit. But still the same box formation, just spread a little bit.
Just looser, so we can
try and stretch the head the other way. 2 hours sitting with the head pointed one way, staring at someone, gets a little bit sore after a while.
Yeah, I could imagine. That's what I was thinking. It's a long flight to be in close formation, so I was thinking you must loosen off a bit. But
the Avenger's so stable; it's like driving a Mini next to a bus. It just sits there. So as far as formation flying goes, it's not too bad.
It must be quite a really cool formation to be flying into when you look out of your Texan that you're flying and you've seen the Avenger and the Spitfire next to you.
Yeah, you look out the window and you just think, wow. And in particular, the Spitfire, you see it on the ground, you see it at air shows, and it looks amazing.
Yeah.
The first time that you're flying an aeroplane and you see this thing turn in on you to join up the formation, and suddenly it's a real thing, and you're looking at these cannons, far out that it's a weapon of war.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a beautiful machine. It's amazing, but they didn't design it to look good.
No, you're right, and I remember being at an air show, Classic Fighters air show a few years back, and I had an airside pass, and I was actually doing some filming amongst the aircraft that were all parked up, and it was just before the evening show, and Keith Skilling was in the Spitfire, and he came basically diving in. I looked up. I wish I'd turned the camera on. I was just staring in amazement because he was coming straight at me, you know, and he was aiming straight at me, and I was thinking, man, this is what it feels like to be on the receiving end of one of these. You don't get that feeling when you're in the crowd. It's a whole different thing.
And
Definitely
flight as
felt.
well. It was it's interesting because even in the Texan, with the noise of your own engine, the pressurized cockpit, the helmet, earplugs, everything, you can still clearly hear the Avenger and the Spitfire, but especially the Avenger.
Wow.
And just the throb coming out of the Avenger and the growl from the Spitfire. And even to the point where when we were coming north again, we got to Hamner Springs and we flew over Hamner, and then the Avenger increased the power setting to get up and over the ranges. And you could tell when the throttle went full, you know, this because the noise increased. So you can almost get a sense of what lead's doing just by the racket that they're making. It's a nice racket. It sounds good.
That's the one thing I did notice on all the videos I saw of the flight is you could definitely hear the Avenger over everything else.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I don't think people are disappointed to not be able to hear the Texan. The Avenger sounds amazing.
It's great. It's great to have that noise in the flight because people we don't even know anything about, they're going to hear it and look up and go, wow, look at that, you know.
Yeah, it's hard to miss 45 litres of engine flying past.
So as I said earlier, I followed the flight on Flight Radar, and the call sign was TXN GLD, which I guess is Texan Gold. And will that be the same on Saturday, and will that be the same call sign through?
It will be on Saturday. So that's when we are taking off at the moment. Because every aircraft has different requirements on the ground, and in particular the Spitfire has very limited time on the ground with its cooling. But at Ohakea, especially, the Avenger and Spitfire depart from one end side of the airfield, and the Texans depart from the other. So we're actually getting airborne as two separate formations. So the Texans are getting airborne as Texan Gold, and then we join up on the Avenger and become Heritage. So at the moment, we'll be holding on to the Texan Gold call sign and flight ID. In the future, we hope to change that to Heritage. Because once we're formed up, we're Heritage 1, 2, 3, 4. So just to help with the facilitation at the moment, the Texans are getting airborne as Texan Gold or Texan Silver. You know, if Gold's already out and about on that day, then we become Texan Silver and Bronze. It's just the way it is at the moment.
Cool.
In fact, there's one flying over right now.
So let's talk about the team. Who's in it apart from yourself? I know the Avenger's flying by Jim Rankin.
Yep, Jim Rankin's flying the Avenger, and there's myself in the Texan, and we've got Paul Stockley in the other Texan, and Sean Perrott in the Spitfire. And it's a team. We actually have a formation demonstration routine. So we've that formation that people have been seeing doing flypasts over last weekend and this weekend coming. We've actually worked up a display routine. So it's that formation you've seen plus line of stern plus individual aerobatic displays. It's about a 10-minute routine. We've got stuff going in front of the crowd the whole time, plenty of noise, plenty of metal. But the air shows got cancelled this year. So we were hoping to really roll that out at Warbirds over Wanaka. But we don't unfortunately have that opportunity now, so hence more flypasts. So what people are seeing is not just a collection of aircraft, it's actually the Air Force Heritage Flight display team, which is exciting. It's that's a heap of fun doing that.
And there's that you've got that team, but obviously this year sorry.
So the Heritage Flight as a whole, we've also got Stu Anderson in there as well, and he's he's looking after the Tiger Moth at this stage, which unfortunately we don't have Tiger Moth flying for him. But he's an important member of the team as well, and we've got him flying the Harbour too to keep his skills up.
Right.
Obviously, he's a very experienced warbird pilot in his own right, and very important to the team. And you're going to see more and more of Stu in the next couple of years.
Excellent.
And therein lies what the Tiger Moth's doing. You know, that's building the pool of pilots within the Air Force that we can then identify to move on to the operationally relevant stuff. And those pilots need to remain proficient in the harbour, because the Air Force doesn't even operate an aircraft with a piston engine at the moment anymore.
Yeah.
You add heavy piston tail dragons, and the skill set is just completely different. So we can't, in the future, just identify someone, a Texan pilot, and say, "Oh, congratulations, you're now flying a Harbour." So we need to have the ability to build a pool of people that we can do that with, and so that's the Tiger Moth, which is now back to how it was, right? You get that initial experience in Tiger Moth, and then you'd move on to the Harbour, and then you'd go and fly the Avenger or the Spitfire and whatnot.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's quite neat that we're doing it again now. But within all of the aircraft, so we've got at the moment we've got the Avenger, the Spitfire, the Harbour, and Tiger Moth. But with even though the Avenger and the Spitfire are the purpose, the reason for the heritage flight, the Harbour is actually the critical aircraft, because through that's how the pilots of the Avenger and Spitfire, that's how they maintain their proficiency. So the hours are so limited in the Spitfire, for example, that it'd be a bit irresponsible for the RNZAF to say, right, you're going to go fly an airshow routine and an airplane that you've hardly flown this year, because we're not going to, there's not many hours available. So we maintain the proficiency on the Harbour. So that's the critical aircraft for us, and we're very lucky at the moment that Rex Brereton is letting us use his aircraft, 76. And Rex is part of the furniture at Ohakea. He was a controller here for 40 years. He retired just over a year ago.
Yeah. And
his aircraft his Harbour is amazing. It's as it left the Air Force. He hasn't repainted it, but he's looked after it really well. So when you fly this machine, you're sitting in exactly how it was. It's a very nice Harbour, that one.
That's absolute heritage in itself, isn't it? Just that aircraft.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a good one, that one.
Yeah. And you say he's letting you use his at the moment, because you would normally be using 1015, that's out, and then after that you've been using Brendan Dare's 1037, but that's out at the moment as well.
Yeah, Biggin Hill Trust's aircraft, yeah. So the aircraft engine was getting towards the end of its life, and we were using it knowing the engine on condition, and we were monitoring, as you do with an aircraft engine, and nothing in particular happened.
Yeah.
But the engine just started to say, you know what, guys, probably time, I reckon.
Yeah.
So we made the decision early. The Biggin Hill Trust made the decision early that time was up. So that engine headed off to the United States.
Right.
But it's probably a good chance to talk about that relationship with the likes of Rex Brereton and Biggin Hill Trust and the Air Force Heritage Flight. So the Air Force doesn't operate these aircraft. So the RNZAF is entering a contract with Biggin Hill Trust and Rex Brereton for heritage aviation services. So the Biggin Hill Trust, for example, is the operator of the aircraft, and they are responsible for all things that an operator is. And the aircraft operated 100% in accordance with civil aviation rules, and the Air Force pilots that fly the aircraft are doing so as pilots of the Biggin Hill Trust.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic, but one that's working really well so far. The Air Force will say, well, we've identified this pilot. we'd like them to be involved in the heritage flight. The Air Force then takes that pilot to the operator, Rex Brereton or the Bigham Hill Trust, and says, we would like this pilot. What do you think? And the Bigham Hill Trust can say, yeah, great, or no, we don't want that, which hasn't happened yet. Then all of the training, all the procedures, the supervision, and all that is up to the Bigham Hill Trust or Rex Brereton. And the reason for that gets back to the fact that the Air Force doesn't operate any aircraft that's anything like these heritage aircraft. And so the RNZAF doesn't have the expertise, the technical or operational expertise to provide supervision for this type of flying. And that expertise is in the external sector with the likes of the Bigham Hill Trust.
Yeah.
So we're contracting them to provide that service to us.
It's a terrific arrangement. It's neat that you've been able to work out how to do this, and
well, it's pretty standard. It's the way the civil aviation rules are written. If mum and dad invested by a Cessna, they then register it with the local aero club, and the local aero club is the operator. So, specifically with Harvard 15 or the Tiger 62, the NZDF retains title to the aircraft, but they'll be registered with the operator.
Okay, right. Yeah, interesting. So let's talk about the aircraft that you won't be flying, because there was a lot of questions come up on the forum and Facebook stuff about, what about the helicopters? What about the Devon? All that. What's the story with the ones that used to be part of the collection of the historic flight?
Well, the thing to realise is everyone in the heritage flight aviation nuts. We love these airplanes. This is what we like to do on our weekends and our spare time. So we're a fan of all these aircraft. Obviously, we need to concentrate on the operationally relevant aircraft, the ones that we were talking about before, and the aircraft that will enable that, which is your Tiger, Moth, and the Harvard. So with the likes of the Devon, great airplane. I've flown it, love it. Others in the flight have flown them as well. Really nice airplane, but it doesn't fit the bill with what we're trying to do with the heritage flight. And of course, like everything, we've got our funds, and we need to devote that to the mission that we're doing. So unfortunately, that means that the likes of the Devon is not going to be flying with heritage flight.
Yeah.
Hence why the RNZAF actually just recently disposed of the Devon aircraft. We have retained a Sioux. We've got one. We've got Sioux and the spare parts. Yeah. We're carefully storing it at the moment, and that was just to give any future Chief of Air Force the option, if they choose to. It will be a slight sideline from the heritage flight mission at the moment. So we don't have any intent on flying the Sioux anytime soon, but we've kept one.
Yeah. And you don't have an Iroquois? No.
No, the Iroquois that's in the Bigham Hill Trust hangar, that belongs to the Air Force Museum of New Zealand, as does the Devon, actually. Yeah. And the Mackie, that belongs to Wairarapa Flying Tigers.
Yes. That's exactly what I was going to say too, because lots of people were saying, "Oh, they're going to fly the Mackie." Well, no, it doesn't even belong to them.
I mean, it's not. It's like flying a magic carpet.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't fit the bill.
Yeah.
And it's not ours.
Yeah, exactly. So the other question that came up too was the other Harvards that have been stored ever since 1970s with the old historic flight. They're still with the heritage flight.
Because we part of the decision to let's just look after Harvard 15 for a bit, get the flight going, and then readdress what we're going to do with 15.
Yeah.
Is that if we choose to fly Harvard 15 again, then we still need those other two aircraft for the spares, like they have been doing since the late 80s when we set this thing up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so all those people who think they're going to buy a cheap Harvard, they can wait.
Sorry. Yeah, the Harvard and the spares, they're to provide some longevity for us, unfortunately, for those that want to buy them.
Yeah. So you also did mention, when you're saying what the core future is for the Heritage Flight, you also mentioned the Kitty Hawk and the Corsairs. So down the track, are you hoping that this might be a possibility of adding more fighters to the?
So they're an example of probably the pinnacle of the aircraft that represent what we're about. And the Kitty Hawk and the Corsair, they were the ones that from the fighter side were doing the job in the Pacific, and we're extremely lucky to have the Avenger, which was also operating up there at the time. So we don't have any specific plans for those two aircraft, but what you're seeing at the moment is the start of the Heritage Flight. That's how we've got the thing going. We are not saying that we're going to that the makeup now will be the makeup for the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah,
we're going to have an open tender board that should be set up within the next year, and operators in New Zealand that feel they have an aircraft that fits the bill and represents our operational military heritage can provide us their tender with their aircraft, and then that gives us the ability to select the aircraft that best represent what we want from the Heritage Flight at any given time. So whilst I mentioned the Corsair and the Kitty Hawk, we don't have anything planned in the short term. That's a representation of what the flight's. It's a descriptor for what we're describing for the flight.
Yeah, I just thought that had better be addressed because people will start asking the question. But
if someone wants to get us a Corsair and a Kitty Hawk, right? Yeah. Give me a ring.
Well, if you're going that far, you might as well get a Ventura as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
It would.
We have to say that the RNZAF and New Zealand has done very well out of the Biggin Hill Trust. What they're doing, what they've done, and what they're doing is amazing. So the RNZAF feels very privileged to be able to enter an agreement with them to do what we're doing. And
absolutely.
We're very respectful of that, and that I'd imagine that relationship is going to continue for some time in the future.
Of course, with that too, we've on the horizon, probably not too far away, actually, the way that they're working on it is the Mustang is going to be flying soon, and so we may see that flying with the Texans and Avenger. Yeah.
I mean, the RNZAF never operated those operationally, flew them operationally. Amazing airplane, though. One of those flies past, certainly get people's attention, so it fits the bill like that.
Yeah.
Look, we'll just have to sit down with the Biggin Hill Trust and closer to the time, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying either way.
You say the RNZAF never flew them operationally as in going to a war, but of course Kiwis did fly them in World War II, RNZAF members in RAF squadrons and even in US
exchange
squadrons.
With the Americans as well.
Yep. So
absolutely. So it's definitely a part of our military aviation heritage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's amazing. It's exciting, and what you've managed to pull together, the team is fantastic, and I just can't say more than that because it's just brilliant. I was going to say too, the current pilots, they're all quite experienced instructors. You're all instructors at the moment. This isn't your full-time job. This is just the sideline to what you do as instructors with 14 Squadron and CFS Central Flying School. And have you got any 42 Squadron instructors among you as well at the moment?
Of course, Jim Rankin. He's 42 Squadron at the moment. So the Air Force Heritage Flight is administered by the Central Flying School. And we need pilots who are or have been Central Flying School ACAP flying instructors, because it's through that the display flying qualifications and experiences are assured. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the RNZAF doesn't do the Lawson competition with all of its flying instructor students anymore. So at the end of each flying instructor course, the students used to do a low-level aerobatics routine overhead Ohakea. we don't do that anymore. The high performance of the Texan warrants that people who go out and do low-level display aerobatics are identified and worked up individually.
Yep.
But the one group of pilots who all have display flying qualifications and experience is the Central Flying School instructors.
Right.
So hence why that's why we're channeling through there. But that's an interesting point you raised, that back in the day, the historic flight was traditionally just if you're at CFS, you could fly for historic flight. Well, now that's not the case. As long as you've got that CFS and display flying experience, you could now be at 3 Squadron flying an NH90, and if you fit the bill, welcome aboard. Come on to the heritage flight. So we really want those people that are enthusiasts.
Yes.
This is pretty special. It's not something that you do as a rite of posting. And this is something that we want people who are enthusiastic about and that are committed, which is not hard when you say to someone, would you like to fly this amazing machine? Most people are pretty enthusiastic about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Especially when it's on the base there and everybody's seeing these things operating, they must all think, God, I'd love to fly that one day.
Yeah. And that helps retention. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for myself, I pinch myself every time I get into the harbour in particular, and just think, how did this happen? I don't want to go anywhere because I love it so much. So it's keeping me motivated. It's keeping me in the RNZAF, which it's a great job anyway. Don't get me wrong. The entire RNZAF fleet is either brand new or it's about to be brand new, with the likes of the C-130J and the P8. So gone are the days when our equipment was old and out of date. Our stuff is up to date. Even the Orions that they're retiring now, that's an amazing machine. The stuff that they've got down the back of that machine is world class.
Yeah.
The pay, fantastic. The pay got sorted out 2008. I think they really addressed that.
Yeah.
No complaints now with that for what we're doing. It's good. It's not the Air Force of old.
No, exactly. Another good thing about this too is, bringing new pilots through your system is bringing pilots into the Warbird system as well, because there's a real sort of, you look at the Warbird operators now, they're all getting older and there's not that many younger ones coming through because of the costs, and if people can do it through the Air Force and get paid to do it, then they can move on to the air shows and fly stuff that way. That's another benefit for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause my early vintage flying, I was funding it, and it hurts. It's hard. And so, you're absolutely right. And of course, the New Zealand Warbirds, they administer our low-level display authorization. So we're flying these aircraft as under the civil rules. So the Air Force Heritage Flight has to work closely with the New Zealand Warbirds Association in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and of course, you guys, all of you pilots, have flown at air shows, Warbirds air shows and all that sort of thing. Anyway, you're all part of the scene already, but this is going to be a great way to sustain that and keep it coming through. Yeah,
it's one of those groups I was talking about. This is how the RNZAF shows its professionalism in the aviation community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, it's a big thank you and awesome job to the hierarchy, the Chief of Air Force and all those who actually saw what you guys were wanting to do and actually said, let's do this, because at any given time in the Air Force's history, you could have a team at the top that just goes, no, this is going to be too expensive. See you later. So good on them for making this happen.
Yeah, well, hopefully the engagement that we had even just from last weekend, that shows what an amazing tool we've got in the Heritage Flight. And I have to point out the current Chief of Air Force, he's an aviation enthusiast. We're talking about a guy that the ringtone on his phone is a Merlin engine.
Yeah.
he gets it.
Yeah, I've met Andrew Clark a few times, and yeah, he's a real enthusiast, awesome guy.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to fly with him both on the Orion, but more recently as well to Ardmore and back in the Texan. We were formating on the Avenger, and we just spent the whole day chatting about old airplanes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's been great to talk to you and hear all about the flight. And I wish you well for the future, and I hope that Saturday goes really well with the northern excursion. You're going to get you get a lot more people see you going north, because you're going to be flying over Auckland, where it's the biggest city in the country. So, and Hamilton as well, and places like Cambridge, Taupo. Yeah, you're going all the way up.
Yeah,
those places. Those places. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So all I can say is to the listeners to go to your Facebook page, and you'll see the entire route on there, and you've got the times and which street or beach you're going to be flying over at that place. So, which is handy.
We can do that now, because of course when we went to Christchurch and back, vaccine passes were still in place, so we couldn't tell people be at this point, because we couldn't control vaccine passes for the large crowd that was about to turn up, and even though outside with no vaccine pass, you still had the limits. So sorry for any confusion that may have caused at the time, but we're doing what we can.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to throw in, if you're waiting somewhere for the flight, get on your phone, look up Flight Radar 24 and find the flight and see where they are, because you'll see exactly where they're coming from, where, how long you've got before they get to your place, so you won't miss them. And I know there was a bit of consternation on Sunday, because unfortunately with the weather you couldn't get over the hills to Wairarapa, and which is a shame, because I know you were planning to mark the 80th anniversary of 14 Squadron.
Yeah. And that was interesting, because we tried several times to get across the ranges over to the Wairarapa, but we just couldn't. But then that put us very early coming into Wellington. We thought, well, we can hold here, and then hit Wellington on time. But the problem is that the east coast of the South Island had low cloud as well. So what was playing on our mind is we need any fuel that we can get in order to potentially have to turn around and divert back to Woodburn as we made our way down the east coast of the South Island. So look, we're sorry that we couldn't get to the Wairarapa at all. That was pretty clear. The place was completely socked in with cloud. But look, we arrived at Wellington 10 minutes early as well. But there was a lot of moving parts going on there. So we chose the extra fuel to give us the options later. Most people still saw it.
I mean, that makes sense. Aviation is always, things can change while you're in the air, and so there's nothing that could be done about it. I know there's a few people complaining, but most people were happy.
It just shows their enthusiasm, right?
Yeah, that's right. They went out to watch you, and that shows how enthusiastic they are. So
they were disappointed that some missed us when we went over slightly early. It's good. Not good that we couldn't get there exactly on time, because that's what we aim for. But understand that we were grabbing the extra fuel so that we could potentially maximize the chance of actually finishing the mission as it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should probably close it there, Mike. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Good chatting.
Cheers.